Ingrid Leary, a member at Labour MPP for Tairi. Good morning to you, Ingrid.
Good morning.
Do you feel that way about the US? Do you think, God, as bad as things might get here, at least we're not them?
Yes. Slippery slope, though. That's why we've got to safeguard all of our democratic institutions. I lived in Fiji for a while, of course, and I've seen how fragile democracy is. So let's never take it for granted.
Well, I do. I mean, I'm assuming that I can take it relatively for granted because we've got so many institutional bulwarks that protect us. In what way do you think it might be under threat? The select committee process probably doesn't have the teeth it should, which is why those of us who would prefer a 4-year term have a bit of reservation because, God forbid, a 4-year term with unbridled power. So I think, we are a transparent democracy on the scale of global democracies, and I do think it's a kind of a scale rather than black or white, but I have seen how fragile it can be, and certainly when I was in Fiji, there'd already been a couple of coups. I didn't predict that there was going to be another one. I was working in media at the university at the time, and it caught everybody by surprise, so I do think we have to be vigilant. I have to say, be honest with you, select committees, I mean, I was there a long time ago as well, but they've always been just, frankly, a cheer squad for Cabinet, haven't they? Nothing's changed.
I think that there is a danger that they are a tick box or a rubber stamp for the executive, and so looking at how we can strengthen that is good. We've got a couple of scrutiny weeks coming up, which is a new invention, if you like, from the Business Committee, and I think it's the Business Committee. This is designed actually to try and provide some more scrutiny and oversight where the opposition parties will get ministers in front of them and be able to have an organised kind of forensic questioning of ministers and or their departments. And there's some guidance around that, and the whole thing has been, agreed on by all the parties last year, regardless of who was in Parliament, because members were concerned that there just isn't the level of scrutiny there should be.
Is that of ministers or of departments in toto?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So that normally it would be sitting weeks. Instead of having these 2 sitting weeks, it will be scrutiny weeks. And so it will depend, I think the effectiveness will depend on how well the committees are chaired by the government. Of course, all but one of the committees is chaired by government members, so how respectful of the guidance they are, but also how organised opposition parties are with the types of questions, and being able to have a sort of back and forth with the minister to tease things out. As you can imagine, perhaps in a courtroom, it is forward-looking, but really getting to the nuts and bolts of the budget allocations, what they're planning to do, what the plans are, how they're going to be implemented, how across them ministers are, and so on. It will be important.
Okay. I've just been reading, and I know that social housing is always an issue for you, and you are concerned about those who are vulnerable at the bottom edges or the bottom ends of society. In your pastoral administrations as a constituency, but also as a member of Parliament of your party. And I've just been reading a very interesting piece in the New Zealand Herald this morning. I don't know if you caught up with it, you might not have yet, to do with Kāinga Ora, and a sort of a very good piece of journalism, in actual fact, about what's really wrong with Kāinga Ora. Have you come across that or seen that at all?
No, I haven't. I've been on flights since about 6 a.m. trying to head to Mystery Creek for Fieldays, but I will make sure
you're going to Fieldays. Okay, no, do. It's just brilliant. Is it Tom Coughlin? I think he's the deputy political editor of the New Zealand Herald. He's written a really good piece on it. No. His central thesis, though, is this: that the model is broken, and that it was broken, and he's not blaming necessarily National or Labour, because he says neither of party did a particularly brilliant job. But the whole idea that the last Kāinga board basically, or the governance team, went off the tracks by deciding they weren't just a landlord for state housing, but they were some sort of development agency as well, and that's the latter role that got them into trouble. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a fairly middle to right
kind of political perspective, and I would expect that from that particular journalist. So, that's an ideological position that he would take. My view is that there is always a place for the state to be building houses. We need more housing supply, and we need laws that free that up. I don't want to see the privatisation of state housing, which is what I fear is about to happen.
Okay, so you think that article was written with a particular political agenda in mind?
It's hard to know without having read it, but knowing the type of coverage from that journalist, I would say that sort of sits around the middle to the right of political ideology. I'm not saying it's wrong. I have a different view where I think that there is a role for the state to build houses. Those who disagree would say it's less efficient. I worry about privatisation of the sector and ultimately of inefficiency once we start looking to the private sector significantly to be providing social housing.
I'm interested in your view on that because it brings into wider relief that there are certain journalists that you personally trust and those that you just sort of, Tom Coughlin obviously for the New Zealand Herald, that you dismiss as essentially having a particular political slant. Do you think those...
I don't think that's fair. I would just say I'm not surprised by that article. I think there's an area in the middle that most of the New Zealand journalists sit in. Most of them are pretty good. Occasionally they will show their hand on something, and I don't say I'm mistrustful. I'm just not surprised, and that's probably a better characterisation of what I was saying.
All right, you're heading off to Mystery Creek today. Can I ask in what capacity?
As a member of Labour's Rural Caucus. So,
okay.
There to have a listen, keep my ear to the ground, and to compare and contrast the feedback we get here with the experience of farmers in my electorate entirety, which of course has a large rural element.
Last year, I made a note of this. I keep notes of our interviews and things like that. And I look back in my diary, and you were heading off there last year as well. And you said you got a very good. You thought you got a very respectful listening or hearing from the farmers at Field Day last year.
Yeah, that's right. I can remember actually that I pulled over to the side of the road and had a chat with you. I can remember it was a beautiful day. My purpose for attending last year, I knew there was a lot of
Oops, we've lost Ingrid. She's driving, I suspect. You get her back, please, Josh, if you could. That would be great.
Yeah. Hello, Michael.
Hello, you're back. You've gone through some sort of tunnel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Look, I wanted to make sure that day that anyone I spoke to felt that they had had a good hearing, that they'd been listened to. And certainly that was the experience, and I had some good interactions. There were some sort of blatant climate deniers and people with quite strange ideas about COVID. We sent them up the path to some of the more fringy political parties and suggested they go and have a yarn there.
You mean the ones that got elected are now part of the coalition government?
No, I'd say even more fringy than that. New Zealand Royal and a few others. Oh gosh, I'll be really upsetting some of your listeners now, but...
I don't think we've got too many loyal listeners here.
The main point was that, I felt we listened, and I think some of the farmers were surprised because there's so much partisanship peddled in the media, and I think that when you can meet face to face and have a respectful difference of opinion, people are pleasantly surprised about that.
Now, yesterday the government, and obviously maybe the timing was exact and determined, but yesterday the government announced that, Waka Eke Noa was dead, and that they're going to, obviously, as they announced in the coalition agreement, they're going to review the agricultural emissions, and the Greens have gone mad about it in the last 24 hours. What's your particular view of that, Ingrid, and yesterday's statement?
I think it's short-sighted. So it may feel like there are gains in the short term, but ultimately it will impact on our trade relationships and our ability to meet our international commitments. So I do think we need to take a long-term approach, and it's a shame that we're not doing that. It will take New Zealand backwards.
Tell me how it's going to affect our international relationships.
Well, we have got pretty tight requirements, particularly with the EU free trade agreement, and the commitments to mitigating climate change are not going to go away. They are going to become increasingly important. So we need to be on that journey, and every time we kick the can down the road by carving out particular sectors and saying, oh, but it doesn't apply to you yet, is slowing that down and will ultimately impact our international reputation.